Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and I want to thank you for tuning in this evening. It is Wednesday, April the 24th, 2019, and we'll be here live for the next hour. Looking forward to tonight's episode. I'm going to be talking with a poet here from the Atlanta area, a friend of mine, Michael Burke. He is also the host of the monthly poetry event held at Phoenix and Dragon Bookstore, and does a lot of other work here in the area as well with his sound meditations and guided meditations. So he'll be joining us coming up in the next segment, talk about his life and work. Here at the top of the show, just a couple of quick notes I did want to touch on briefly. First of which happened last night. I like to take a walk up to the local park as often as possible, and I do that sometimes in the evening. And lately around this area, there's been workers out digging a lot of holes along the main road because they are burying the phone lines. And so I've been avoiding those off to the side in the grass mainly as I walk down the main sidewalk. So I'm bebopping along last night under the moon and stars, listening to some music, feeling good about life in general, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like a cartoon character, Wile E. Coyote, when he realizes that he has gone over the cliff and there's no longer any solid foundation beneath him, drops like a ton of bricks. I did the same, and right in the middle of the sidewalk stepped into a large hole. And so after I fell about 3 feet in of what was full of water for some reason, I caught myself slammed into all the mud in the surrounding area, pulled myself up, and did the only possible thing at that point: turn around in the opposite direction and head back home to survey the damage. And I've been hobbling around a little bit today, but all of these things in life are temporary, and really, I just had a good laugh over the matter. I want to call up Google and see if one of their engineers or technicians can send me the footage from all of those satellites they have up there watching us, because I think that it must have been quite a sight watching me crash into a ditch, and I'd like to get one more laugh out of it at least. So, on a slightly different note, I did also want to mention that my new book of Sand and Sugar was released about a week ago through Cyberwit out of India, and copies of that are available through the publisher and on Amazon, and I also have a few copies here on hand if there's anyone interested in picking up a copy directly from me. Just shoot me an email at 17numa@gmail.com, or connect with me on Facebook or Instagram or any of those social media platforms, and would be happy to work that transaction out with you. always appreciate support for the independent presses and the independent authors. It goes a long way and is greatly appreciated. Coming up on Saturday, the 27th, going to have an episode of Songs of Selah at 2:30 p.m. Eastern with Mark Zegans, who's going to be on talking about his most recent book. And then later that evening, I'm going into Atlanta for the UUCA Wine, Cheese, and Spoken Word event. Always try to attend that. It's held bi-monthly and hosted by Carol Welter, who is a previous guest on this program. And so I invite everyone to check out the archives of 17 Numa Radio, where her episode is available along with all the others. You can also find an archive of those episodes at 17numa.com. And if you're listening, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. It is free and easy. Just click on the follow button found above the slideshow on the page where this episode is streaming, and that'll get you in the loop and set up to receive notifications for all the future guests that are going to be appearing in the near future and beyond. And so I think that just about wraps up this opening segment. Going to play this track, which was written and produced by Michael Burke, who will be joining us on the other side. So enjoy.
South Louisiana, around Jackson Square, close to the bayou, got the voodoo there. They bon ton, lay in every spot. I love this Crescent City that care forgot. I love this Crescent City that care forgot. Out in the quarter, all night long, feeling that land, yeah, for coming on strong. Lost in the swamp of this Cajun charm, walking the bank with my white boots on. Yeah, with my white boots on. I got New Orleans in my blood, like the river got its mud. Decadence dances everywhere. I get my spice down there. Fight down there. You know we wander, baby. Yeah, we do. We wander the city like many movement knew, doing the things we ain't supposed to do. Yeah, we dive in the dives and we crawl through the streets. Then we dance in the dark on someone else's sheets. Someone else's sheets. She like to whisper, she like to curse. She keep a little Mardi Gras in her purse. Not quite a sinner, she not quite a saint. One half a lady, but the other half ain't. No, it ain't. One half a lady, but the other half ain't. I got New Orleans in my blood. Got its mud. Decadence dances everywhere. I get my spice down there. I get my spice down there. She not quite a sinner. No, she's not quite a saint. One half a lady, but the other half ain't. No, it ain't. Yeah. So one half a lady, but the other half ain't. I got New Orleans in my blood, like the river got its mud. Decadence dances everywhere. I get my spice down there. I got New Orleans in my blood, like the river got its mud. Decadence dances everywhere. I get my spice down there. Woo! I get my spice way down there.
All right, welcome back to Songs of Selah here on this Wednesday evening. That was New Orleans, Spice Down There by our guest this evening, Michael Murphy Burke. And without further ado, I want to introduce him by reading the bio off of his website, michaelmurphyburke.com. Michael Murphy Burke was born in New Orleans, Louisiana on September 30th, 1959. This happens to be the same day that Rumi, the great Sufi mystic poet, was born. This is not a coincidence, as coincidence is just God's way of staying anonymous. Michael grew up surrounded by music, art, passion, freedom of expression, and the absolute power of living on his own path. He's been a poet all his life, with his first published material being in his high school newspaper when he was a sophomore. More recently, he contributes steadily to Oracle magazine and is also published in Aquarius magazine and Conscious Life journal. In addition to writing, Michael also creates artistic visions in a variety of woods for private clients as a custom woodmaker. He can also be found doing spoken word, sound journeys, and meditations throughout the Atlanta area and beyond. And so, Michael, my friend, thank you for joining me this evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Scott. How are you?
Doing pretty well so far. Thanks for coming on the program. Been trying to get this set up for a while, so it's good to talk to you.
It is. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You've lived a very interesting life, I'm sure, and we're going to delve into some of that here tonight. Talk about that journey of the spiritual path. And I guess a good place to start is with that track that we just listened to. When was that written, and how did the production of that come about?
That is Spice Down There. That's probably 18 or 20 years ago when I wrote that. We recorded it. I believe that was recorded in downtown Atlanta around West End. Various musicians. We had done the original track just as a demo for Dr. John, famous New Orleans musician, piano player, and did get a copy to him. We have not seen it recorded by him as of yet, but I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. John, and he very much liked the song and was doing some arranging on it. The last time I spoke with him on working it into one of his albums in the future. So as a songwriter, I really just wanted to write the songs and have other people perform them. But as I got in the studio and started making the demos, I realized how much I really enjoyed cutting the tracks myself. And I do like singing in the studio, but I don't sing out in public much, except during my sound journeys. I might do some spiritual type chanting, but regular type music I really don't do much anymore. But I still shop some songs around, and that was from my experience in New Orleans. As very much thought of New Orleans as a lady, and how she's one half a lady and the other half ain't, for sure. A city full of wisdom and wonder, but also full of debauchery and quite an easy place to lose yourself in trouble, as well as to find yourself through some of the saints and others that wander the city. It's quite a mixture. A wonderful place to grow up, I must say.
Well, I think just staying on that subject of New Orleans, because it's obviously embedded itself deeply into your consciousness and who you are as a person. What type of experiences did you have there growing up that shaped you and set you on your path?
Well, a very wonderful childhood. A couple of brothers and a sister, and my mom mostly raised us. My dad had left when I was around 9 or 10, and great respect for my mother taking care of all of us and bringing us about, but it also gave us a sense of freedom and a sense that, you just have to make best with whatever life deals you. And my mom taught us that very well, and New Orleans taught us to really just not to judge anyone or to judge yourself, just to express yourself. I quite enjoyed all of the aspects of growing up there. Through high school, I was pretty good up until maybe freshman year, and like junior high and grammar school were very good student. And around freshman year, I discovered some of the wonders of the alternate lifestyles of living, as far as mind-enhancing things and different things that could alter your consciousness, and being in a port city, and also hanging around some of the, what they call the wrong crowd. In my 4 years in high school were quite adventurous, and learning about a side of the city and the living that I didn't know much about. My mom was very kind of straight-laced, not much of a drinker or a partier in any way, but I knew that some of my uncles and my dad had lived that way. So for me to explore both was, as a Libra, it was a balance for me. I wanted to dive deep into the wells of darkness, as well as see what it was to kind of fly in the light. So constantly been seeing that no matter how high we go, we have to know the depths of that as well. You cannot reach to the stars unless you're firmly planted in the earth. So I think I did both very well, and stayed in New Orleans till I was about 30, and moved for the good of my health, life, and just living in general. It had taken its toll on me. In New Orleans, I had gotten out of high school and got directly into music, did some recording engineering, really wanted to focus in on being a recording engineer and writing music and getting into the behind-the-scenes aspect of it. Was never a big fan of wanting to be in a band or up on stage, but I sure liked the aspect of the business, and I like being behind the scenes. So that led to other adventures in quite an adventurous lifestyle, and worked mostly at night, and that led to disc jockey work. I started spinning records with a friend of mine. We did mostly parties and weddings and so forth, and then I got hired in a bunch of local nightclubs and was pretty darn good at that. Really enjoyed it, too. Couldn't believe they paid me money to play records, which is what I would do when I got home anyway, and read the albums and all the liner notes, and I just said, boy, somebody's going to pay me to do this. And that was, I still don't think I've recalled all of it, but some of it was definitely just for the moment. And I guess I did that off and on for 10 years, tried a few regular jobs, like what my mom would call a real job, and didn't fit in well with structured schedule or boss or someone telling me what to do. So by the time I got to about 28 or 29, I was really looking at some of the people around me that were in different clubs I was working in and having a kick, but I also saw them as being 10, 15 years older than me and going, I just don't want to be that guy 10 or 15 years from now. It's either make a change and get out of this, or that was going to be the rest of my life, and didn't like it. So right about 29 or 30, I made the change to come up to Atlanta, and it was a major great decision in my life.
When you're talking about making that sudden sort of change, going from one city to another and one type of lifestyle to another, what goes into that, and how quickly is that decision made, and how easy was the transition, or difficult was it?
I didn't find the transition too difficult. I had kind of, now looking back on things, you see so many occasions and circumstances that guide you in the right direction. I fought them for sure through my 20s. I got married when I was 20, absolutely fell in love, married Kathy, and by the time I was 27, 28, we had 2 children. Beautiful, beautiful times were being had, but I was losing control of this whole structure. I had the white picket fence, the wife and the 2 kids, and I also had this absolutely crazy lifestyle as a disc jockey, and the mix of them was not conducive to marriage. So ended up getting separated around 27, and I'd say 27 to 30 were very tough for me because I felt everything was falling apart, and that's that, I guess, dark night of the soul they would call it, but I felt I had lost everything. I was living alone in a little apartment and arrested a few times for various things, and the final time I was right about 29, and I called my mom to get me out of jail, and she did not. She refused, and to this day we laugh about it because it was the biggest moment. You know, when I got off the phone, I remember sitting on the floor of the jail cell, going like, wow, my own mother won't even help me. What the fuck have I done? I think I've dropped pretty far, but I always knew that there was a depth that you could go to, and then I think I wanted to explore that depth. Say, well, I'm down here. I wonder how far it goes. And that was far enough for me. So fortunately, one of the club owners I worked for I kind of connected with most of the people in the city, and he knew I'd been arrested. So he came and got me out. I was only in for about 3 days. Didn't have to stay in, but that was enough for me to know that that's not a place I wanted to go to. So he said, I understand your brother's been asking you to come to Atlanta to do some carpentry. He goes, why don't you go there? Try it out, get out of the city for a while. I believe you had so much more to give, Michael. And this was a very cool guy, a gambler, a nightclub owner. Seemed like he was maybe in on some of the, organized, the organized crime, I guess you'd say, in New Orleans. They were all kind of connected, and it was a very scary kind of scene. But if you were in, you were okay. And he told me, he said, I just don't want you to come any further into this part, Mike, unless you really, really desire it. I don't think you belong here. And if you go to Atlanta and you don't feel like things are working out and it's not going to happen, well, you can come back here and you'll always have a job at any of my clubs. Well, that was just gold. I couldn't believe this man cared so much for me. And having my father gone for a while, I really saw one of the first occasions of a man stepping up and just helping another. And I moved and never went back. So that was a very, very golden opportunity for me that I look back now and say, well, I did take advantage of it, but there was a lot of people, of course, that helped me make that decision. But once I moved, I just didn't realize until I lived away from New Orleans that every place wasn't like New Orleans. I personally thought everyone grew up the same way I did. You have this limited concept of the world around you, and I thought, well, everyone must grow up like this with, the city's open all night, bars never close. You can also have wonderful occasions with Mardi Gras and these Mardi Gras balls where it's a decadent side, but there's also this incredibly sophisticated and fancy side where there's tuxedos and evening gowns and just people appreciating the joy and beauty of life. So I was exposed to it all and realized when I moved to Atlanta that a lot of people didn't grow up with all of that, and that this experience for me, maybe 30 years there was enough. And now it was time for a second chapter, and always it felt like 0 to 30 was one stage, and definitely at 30 another stage started, which was I started working during the day and sleeping at night, and realized there was a whole other world out there with what I call day people. Yeah. Alan Toussaint wrote a song once called Night People. And we used to play it all the time. It's definitely night people. It's a different world. And many times I wouldn't go to work till midnight. I'd work midnight to 6. And then when we'd get off, there'd be clubs that were really happening at 6 or 7 in the morning. So that was our idea of day. And then we'd stay at the club till maybe 9 or 10 with whoever we've been working with, and go home and sleep during the day and then go back to work at night. So the whole thing twisted around for me and flipped, and I really fell in love with carpentry up here. I never really done carpentry, and I knew my brother was doing some woodworking, but in my ignorance, I just thought he was doing some framing, maybe, building some walls and stuff like that. But when I came up, he was working in these magnificent Atlanta mansions. You know, Atlanta's just been a booming city for years. It won't stop growing. And I had no idea he was doing this artistic woodworking with custom stairways and mantles and coffered ceilings and these beautiful niches. And he was creating it all. They'd have some kind of plan, but he also was able to just create. And I fell right into that with joy. And I know that's why my brother invited me, because I knew you'd like that part of it, Mike. You know, once you learn the skills of carpentry and get good at being a carpenter, then you can just start to create, and that's where you really like to live. So I fell in love with the creative aspect of carpentry, and then slowly worked on a few different crews, and then started my own business. I really liked building mantles and anything custom, so I drifted into that, and that has been a really good way to make a living up here. And it allows me to create, allows me to deal with many different people. I like the adventure and just the unexpected creativity that pops up from being able to create on a job site or in a homeowner's home, where some of them really aren't sure what they want. And sometimes I have a vision of what I'd like to build, but we have to let it come together as it's happening. Depends on so many circumstances. And I think that's where my spirituality and my leaning these days towards being such a spiritually involved being came from. I think carpentry really opened that up for me through the power of the creative spirit flowing through me.
Actually, one of the subjects I wanted to talk to you about, because you seem like such a well-centered person, the years that I've known you and seen you at the open mics and other events around Atlanta, and one of the things you touched on in a few different areas there, the duality of life with your changing of schedule, and then also the duality of New Orleans with the people dressing up at the parties, and then also the debauchery, and then also going into those darker places. And a lot of people shy away from that sort of aspect, but I can identify with that when you're on that path, taking it as far as it can go and entering into those realms of consciousness that probably a lot of people don't ever find. But I think that going down to those abysses trigger the ability, or the possibility at least, of raising up even higher than a lot of other people may ever be able to do as well. And so I wonder how you think about that concept of how those darker times, or exploring the shadow aspects of consciousness, helped, along with the carpentry, as you're saying, to bring out that spirituality and seek the heights, and what that part of your path has been like.
Well, I think that's one of the fabulous things about being alive, is that we're allowed to explore all of it. There's never believed in control of anything, and I think we have to let it flow. It's the flow of life that really takes us to places, and you could call it dark night of the soul or dealing with the shadows of life, but they always drew me as much as the joy and the light. And I always felt the shadow was cast by the light, so it's part of it. And that allowed me to explore all aspects of it. And I find great, there's great poetry there for sure, and it seemed to speak to me in the poetic language. Sometimes the deeper I dive down into the abyss of the soul, the more I'd see how much the soul was keeping me up and keeping me alive and shining for me. But it said, you can't just have half of me, you have to take me as a whole. So it all comes together, and it's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's a complete being. You know, you're not going to have joy without sorrow or laughter without tears, but neither are good or bad. They're just both prevalent in learning about the full nature of life. And that's what I felt was I started changing my thoughts on, from being brought up very, very Roman Catholic. New Orleans is a very Roman Catholic city, and it's a very structured type of religion. And I'd see certain people in church on Sunday and maybe come out of the St. Louis Cathedral after Mass, and then that night you'd see the same people in a club we called the Dungeon, just being, not church people. At least from what I had learned, So as I got up to Atlanta, I realized this wasn't just a New Orleans thing. It was everywhere. New Orleans seemed to express it blatantly out in the open to grasp both sides of life. And I realized what a blessing it had been for me to grow up there. And I saw many people not dealing with that, denying their shadows or denying their dark sides till it just popped up at a very inopportune time and usually caused quite a stir. Or it caused them to be in denial, which is another aspect of growing, that you either get through it or you don't. But denial is not going to bring you anywhere except where you have to go. And sometimes it's down in the darkness where we find the light. It's true. I just have been blessed to, I wouldn't say understand it, but I have an understanding of it. It feels good inside of me to be complete. Once again, as a Libra, I feel immediately when I'm out of balance, and that's a blessing and a curse. I sometimes wish I didn't feel all of that, but I'm also very glad that I do. And writing about it, where poetry has always been with me. Poetry has taken me through the times. I like one thing my mother always says to me is she can tell where I was and how I was feeling by the poems I write. She knows the year and where I was and what I was doing just by the poem. So I love the immediacy and the honesty of poetry, and that's what brought me to a fuller understanding of life. And it led me eventually to run a ministry at Unity North and do sacred sound and get highly involved with the spiritual aspect of life and many others who were dealing in that. And I kind of hid what I did in New Orleans and some of the decadence I participated in, not realizing that everyone there had gone through their own dark night of the soul. So once I started sharing very openly and honestly all of my stuff, instead of just the nice stuff that I would read at Unity on a Sunday or something, I found a full acceptance from many people who thought, had only known me from the time I'd moved to Atlanta, and they were like, "Boy, you're just such a good person, and full of light." And but all of that darkness is what brought that to me. So it was time to share, knowing that sharing your story was really what gave other people the power to live theirs and to be open in theirs, especially those who aren't blessed with the ability to write about it. So many times I'd be dishonored to hear someone say, "Wow, that's exactly how I felt. I can't believe you went through that." And that brings us to a oneness, and I really felt the connection of everyone through the power of sharing the story, and eventually led to me working as a vibrational sound therapist at treatment centers, where sharing my story is absolutely incredible and critical to the recovery of others, because I can literally show them, look at me now, where I'm at. I was worse off than any of you are in here right now. So you do not stay where you are. This is part of what you're going through. Don't devalue the lesson that's happening to you right now. And it brought me to a beautiful place in my life.
Well said on so many fronts there, talking about the not repressing any aspects of our life, but just embracing it fully. And then when you're reflecting that truth outward, how much more honestly that resonates with other people, and connecting on that level where we realize that we're all suffering in our own ways and everyone has something going on to their own degree. And when you can connect with people that are just open and forthcoming about that sort of thing, you just realize, yeah, we're all human, like you said, the oneness aspect of it all. And
definitely,
it's really a blessed feeling. You touched on your poetry there a little bit. You've been a poet your whole life, and how did that eventually lead up to the book you released a couple of years ago, The Dancing with the Divine? What was the process of putting that out?
That was a good process. But first I want to say, sometimes, you're walking along just enjoying the night air, the night light, and, you just step in a ditch. It's a perfect example right there.
Yeah. Those things just come out of nowhere sometimes, man.
You just never fucking know. You're like, wow, you're just cruising along, and next thing you know, bam.
It really is.
It's life in a moment right there.
It captures it
I love
completely.
that.
And, it made me think, too, that our problems are so, other than death itself, the problems that we face here on life are so temporary and small. things like that are
Very.
frustrating in the moment, but it just like taking stock of in those moments and just laughing at ourselves and being able to say, this is just one of those fleeting moments that'll pass, and then you just get right back on the horse and keep going forward.
Oh yeah, I think laughter is critical. I think I call it enlaughterment. It lives right next door to enlightenment. You cannot go through this and not laugh about it. Many times I think the universe is all based on vibration. Everything's vibrating, and I think sometimes that the universe is vibrating because the divine, God, Buddha, whatever you like to call it, is laughing at us, and therefore everything just vibrates a little bit.
Yeah, I like that aspect of things. Well, that touches, we can talk about your book, but also the vibrations and the frequencies of these different instruments and crystals that you use in your sound journeys. I want you to talk more about that as well. Yeah,
for sure. I always, from the time I was young, I'd say I was writing from what I remember. My mom tells me the first thing she remembers I wrote was a little story called Contact, and it was about you didn't really know what was going on. It was a young voice just talking about coming to life, but at the end you realize it was a baby talking about coming out of the belly and the birth canal and then coming into this existence. And it was a fascinating little story I wrote for a little newspaper that one of my schools was putting out, and I realized then how much I loved writing, and it was a very poetic piece as well. Can't seem to find it anywhere, but sure would like to come across it. But I do remember that, and the passion, the power, the freedom, the tears and the joy that came from writing that. I felt so good at creating that. I liked that energy flowing through me, and I always said I would put a book of poetry out one day. And it just took me many years to get to that book, which was led to by, as I got involved up here in Atlanta with carpentry for about, I'd say maybe the first 5 or 6 years, I did nothing but carpentry, just worked my ass off, probably worked 12, 15 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. I really fell in love with carpentry, and I realized how good it was for me to do what I called a real job, but I didn't really have a boss. I could work all I wanted and get paid at the end of the week, and that opened up some time for me to take a few nights off after time went by, and I was doing a little better to join a group that was run. Walter Griffin was his name. He ran a place called the Poet Studio, and after about 5 or 6 years up here, I realized how much I really missed writing and that I should get back into some of the groups that encourage poetry. And Walter's was a very good group for me to get into, and I got back into the writing aspect and so many other poets out there that you just never hear about, but they're all doing magnificent work. So I thought, let's just write. Remember Picasso said once, don't worry about your writing is good or bad or anything, or if somebody likes it or doesn't like it. While they're busy judging you, you just keep creating more art. And I really liked that, and I thought, I'm just going to create. Really doesn't matter. But I did learn a lot from many of the classes with him and many of the other poets, and I took all of that in consideration until one day I was doing some tantric therapy to learn about loving myself more. I had to open up to this. Something was troubling me, and that I kept looking for a mate to fulfill me, realizing that at some point it must be me that has to fulfill myself, and then a partner would complement me, not complete me. So I took that as not only a great gift to writing and exploring my own psyche and self, but as a invitation to go further into really writing truth and what I felt in the moment. And one of the ladies that I was working with at the time set a Himalayan bowl on my stomach and tapped it, and it was kind of in the middle of the session, so I really wasn't aware of what was going on, kind of go into a little zone there. And afterwards I asked her what was that she had done, and she goes, it's a Himalayan bowl. I put it on your stomach and the vibrations went through your system. Well, that just lit me up, and it allowed me to start writing from a place of, I'd say a place of disappearance, where I could step out of the way and let the writing come through me. And that was a whole just beautiful level that opened up. And from that, I started getting involved with sound, and the sound opened me to the poetry. But I realized it was the carpentry that had opened me up first, because I had disappeared into carpentry quite a few times, but not really realized what had happened. I was like, that's like writing poetry without any words. I didn't need to write. I just had to be. And some came out as writing, some came out as woodworking, some came out as songs. Didn't matter. As long as I was creating, I seemed to be very happy. And the sound led to me joining a group called the International Sound Therapy Association. And once again, thought I was one of the only people that knew about this. And then there's a whole group that does it. And they go, yeah, we make our living as sound therapists, sound healers, various sound things. I thought, boy, that's really cool. I'd like to get into that. So I started mixing that in with the carpentry. And now I'd say most of my living comes from sound, but I still do carpentry as well. And that in itself, the sound led to me, getting drawn to Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, various Rumi-type poets, Hafiz, and so forth that seemed to be writing from a consciousness of oneness. And I realized that's really what was happening to me. And I got involved with Unity North, eventually ran a ministry over there that teaches sound, and that led to me reading some poetry one day at one of their events, and Reverend Richard heard me reading, and he goes, man, would you be interested in reading a poem during service? And now I do quite a bit of reading over there, and people seem to really enjoy my voice, and I have come a long way in reading, and that's why I really like hosting the Poetry Night too, because I've seen so many poets come through that really, really get better at reading their own words and honoring them, and it's part of how we help one another. And all the little idiosyncrasies throughout life that laced into bringing that to be, the poetry, the sound, the carpentry, I realized they were all this one beautiful path, this one beautiful lesson. And that's when I started being encouraged by a lot of the people at Unity that liked the poetry I read, kept saying, when are we going to be able to get this? How do we get a book of that? And that finally got me to where I put out Dancing with the Divine, really enjoy the process of putting a book out. And we'll have another one called Dancing with the Shadows, hopefully in the next year or so. But still enjoying the first one, and get asked to go around and speak about it a little and talk about it. And mostly a spiritually alive book, very upbeat, but there's a lot of poems I have that don't fit into that particular category, and I thought Dancing with the Shadows would be good to put those in. It's been a wonderful ride, and I feel this now. Say earlier, 0 to 30 was one stage. I think 30 to 60, I'll be 60 this year, was another. And now this other world is opening up where going around doing poetry and sound, and different people knowing me and inviting me to do these things with my voice and with sound that is quite fabulous. I really enjoy it. And sound is where I find my joy these days. I really like I call them sound journeys that I do around the city. It's sometimes called a sound bath or a sound immersion, so many names for it. But out in the public in the different yoga studios, and I do it at several temples and various private work as well. It's just sound. I play gong, Himalayan bowls, Native American flute, various instruments from different cultures that a lot would be used in what they call shamanic sound or shamanic medicine, and some agencies call what I do now frequency medicine. It all works. They seem to have a name and a label for everything, but it's sound. It's what we're all made of. So if we can feel ourselves exist through the power of sound, and we know we're vibrating beings, then why not caress us with those vibrations to tune up the system? I think, you bring in your car, your boat, your bike, whatever for a tune-up. Sometimes we forget to tune ourselves up. We are the most divine machine, the most divine being that we'll ever run around in, this body, this temple. So it's nice to tune people up, and especially these days when people don't seem to take a moment for themselves. It's this instant gratification kind of world. I like people come to my journeys, and it's an hour where you just lay there and you don't do anything. It's the absolute essence of a human being, not a human doing, and you just be. And that is so good for the system, to not be involved, to not think, to just be bathed in sound. It's like it's very similar to a hallucinogenic experience. It alters your consciousness, but many of the places I work now, I don't say that because it's a kind of a drug term. So I just call it expanded awareness, and I can expand someone's awareness to the point where I started to realize I had explored a lot of this growing up, but many people have not, and some like it immediately. Some don't know really what the fuck just happened. They're like, I don't know what happened, but I was not me. I had become everything around me, and I realized that I could be a contributor or a condemner of my reality, that I was responsible for creating it. And that's really good when I'm dealing with the treatment centers with addiction, because to give people the knowledge of their own power and to have them claim it, not only for the good stuff that they're coming into their lives, but claim all the mess ups they've had and claim their mistakes, and to realize these were not mistakes. These were lessons to bring you to right where you are now, and that the ability to open someone to their own power, their own being, is, it's just the best. There's nothing quite like it.
Doing those sound journeys, you talked about your own experience when the gong was hit, sitting on your stomach, and how that lit you up immediately. What are some of the experiences you've had sharing your sound journeys with other people and seeing those awakenings happening in them? I'm sure there must be some amazing stories there of people that you've helped tune into that foundational quality of the vibration, as you talk about, that we're all made of.
Oh, definitely. I've seen many people come to the ministry that we run over at Unity North. Very quiet, not with the ability not to express themselves or have some type of trauma inside of them that they're not quite ready to deal with. And sound, for some reason, seems to go across the board. It helps everyone grasp a piece of themselves and take responsibility for it, and then find some freedom in that. And they'll start realizing that the bowl, the Himalayan bowl, is not just a bowl. It's an energy. It's an energy equalizer. It'll take your energy, and sometimes when I teach people to what they call sing the bowl, and that's just playing the inviter or the striker around the edge of the bowl, and it makes this beautiful sound, this beautiful tone. And the Himalayan bowls tend to branch through all the notes. So the chakras that we have in our system, the 7 chakras, the notes in the bowls are related to those. And the Himalayan bowls will branch through all of those notes. So that's why I feel they can tune up people and bring them to this relevance. Many, many times people will cry during one of my performances, and some people fall asleep. You just never know. I remember playing music in New Orleans. One of the last things you wanted to hear was, "Hey, man, your music put me to sleep." and now I absolutely love to hear that, because I don't think they really fall asleep. They are going into such a state of relaxation that in yoga, it's what you would call yoga nidra. It's kind of a state between waking and dreaming. You're not really asleep, and you're not quite into the dream world, but you're not conscious. Some people might know it from that falling feeling you get all of a sudden when you're trying to fall asleep, or you're sitting somewhere and all of a sudden you pop up and you realize, boy, where have I been for the last minute or 30 minutes? It doesn't matter how long, but you drift into this state, and that's what sound can do. And it brings us to a state of, I think, homeostasis, where the brain, usually a left and right hemisphere, when it hears these sounds, especially as these sounds bounce around all notes and there's no real melody to lock onto, it's just sound that seems beautiful, but then these tones come in and the brain starts to not know what to do with it. So I think it stops being separate. It stops being hemispheres, and it just starts to listen as one. And that brings us to the oneness, and we realize, wow, I am all of this, not separate from it. And that's the power of sound. It's just beautiful.
There's also an aspect, it sounds like, of being there in the present moment, all the chaos of the world outside the doors, so to speak. now, as you were talking, I was thinking of an experience I had several years ago after a yoga session where I just started crying. There was a release of all that pent-up energy, and just being in that focused physical condition and forgetting about the rest of the world, it lets the subconscious play out all those emotions and deal with them. And it sounds like that same sort of thing's going on with the sound journeys. And it's just so amazing how consciousness itself is structured in a certain form, as those experiments that I think Emoto did, where he focused the energy into the water crystals and they formed into more positive and structured, ordered shapes with the higher resonance thoughts that were poured into them. I think those.
Oh, amazing. Masaru Emoto, yes, just incredible. Just the difference between love and hate are the words put on a glass, and then frozen. I mean, the shapes that it shows you what our thought does. It's where all power really exists. It's not outside of us. It's within us. That it's not the environment creating us. It's that we are creating the environment, which is then creating us. So if we're giving out, negative shit and difficult times and complaining and bitching, well, that's what the universe is going to give back to us, because we are part of that creation. We're not separate from it. And sound, I think, during these journeys, some people have never tapped into the power of that, and it is quite shocking at times, and it can make you cry. And all it is a release. I think some things can only be released through us through tears. Crying is not a weakness. It's an incredible strength. I occasionally have people that come to my shows, and they go, oh, yeah, my friend said that he cried at this thing, but, I haven't cried in like 20 years. And I'm like, geez, I don't want to be around you when you do. Good God. I think tears are... They're sacred water, some things can only be moved out of our system through tears. There's another wonderful experiment that was done. I don't remember the company or the organization that did it, but they studied tears from an onion, tears from sadness, tears from laughter, tears from having, maybe sand blown in your face, and these things different things that make your eyes water, and sometimes what we would call cry. Well, each tear was different. Completely different structured energy. Once they analyzed each tear, a completely different makeup to each one. And it just shows you right there that the vibrational essence of tears is carrying and moving energy. It's another way to move energy in and out of your system. Laughter is probably the best, but tears are right up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And our body is made up of, 80% water, they say. And so those crystalline formations in the water are then being structured as those
totally, and now they say water carries intelligence, water carries memory, and I'm a big fan of that, because water is everywhere throughout the universe, and somehow it's communicating. So imagine what it's doing inside of us when we communicate to that water that makes us, that creates us, that keeps life going. We can actually bathe in brilliance by knowing that we create our own reality, and the structure of our water can then be changed, and it changes the structure of each and every organ and cell, and then we can. So when you see some people start to glow, some people that really have it going on and it's together, they start to glow, and that's just the vibrational essence coming out. I think it's why they say in all the old paintings there's halos around the saints and the Savior's heads, because their crown chakra, their light is glowing so strong that it just is light around their head, and the best way to paint it was a halo. It's an expression of energy.
Yeah, that inner illumination, finding resonance with the collective consciousness almost, and finding that higher aspect of our being. And you almost get a spark in their eyes, too. You can see it in some people who are truly on fire.
Oh, yeah.
Pouring through the eyes, I guess, connection to their soul.
Yeah.
But for going on 60 years old, I have to say that you're one of those people I've met who seems to be on fire and seems to have that real spiritual connection, because you have a youthful spirit, and obviously you've taken all these experiences through life and found a healthy way to have that balance, and also the creative aspect. I think there's so much to that. You've been able to find your path using creativity, whether it's through the poetry or the music or the sound journeys or the carpentry, and you're
Thank you, Scott.
fulfilling that calling. We're created to be creative beings by a creator, And so when we get in our little happy zone and get our mojo going through creativity, it's just a beautiful thing to see in people. And so just kudos to you for the path you've led.
Thank you, brother. And you don't hide your light for anyone. One thing I learned as I grew was that I was not shining as bright as I could, because I felt the whole thing about a blessing and a curse, like, why do I have so much that I'd like to do and so much to say? And I thought some people were judging me for it. They go, I don't have that and you have it. And I realized I had to get to a point where I just don't care what other people think, that I'm not going to hide my light for anyone, and that to express myself. We were taught, brought up Catholic, that there was sin and all this bad stuff, but there really isn't. I think sin originally just meant to miss the mark, and I thought, I'm missing the mark. I'm not using the gifts I was given, and one of my teachers had told me the only sin there is not to use the gifts you're given. So what are you hiding from, Michael? And it really made me start to shine and go, well, if I've been given all of this, there is no reason and no way I'm not going to use it. And I just started finding that shine was fine, and the people that didn't like it, well, didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And when you are shining and you're in your own truth, people that are still in that darkness are going to be attracted to you because they want what you have, but then also, much more than that, the other people that are doing their thing and using their gifts and skills are going to attract to you too. And so I think that's what you talk about in your bio with the synchronicity, that life has a tendency to bring in the experiences that we need when we're...
Yeah, and that's where intuition comes in, your ability to be aware of that. I'd say, I don't know if, I think being awake is still a process. It's an awakening. You're not really awake, but you are aware. And I became much more aware of all the energies and powers around me, and that I could dance and play with them. And that's why I called the book Dancing with the Divine. It definitely was a dance. And occasionally I wouldn't listen. My heart would tell me great information. My intuition would tell me great information. And as a man given free will by the great creator, I could choose not to listen to that. Like, hey, wait, I got a better idea. And the universe would just giggle and go, really? Really? You think you do? We just gave you great fucking information, and you decided to do something else.
And the beautiful thing is, though, that cycle comes back. Even when you pass it up, like, you find it cycle back around to the later stage of life, like, given another we keep getting more and more opportunities until we finally get it right. I think karma has something to do with that.
Yeah, the lesson shall be repeated until we grasp it. And like, people go, why does this keep happening to me? Well, because you're supposed to learn something. It's the whole thing about falling down, too. When you fall down, it's not a bad thing. There's something you're supposed to find while you're down there, or you wouldn't be down there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to make mistakes, be afraid to not worry about making mistakes as we go along the path, or else we'll just be stuck in stagnation forever instead of
I agree.
evolving.
You find the mistakes are miracles.
They're
not
absolutely.
A bad thing. When you step away from it, and then one of the fortunate things about getting some age and growing a little older is that you realize there absolutely were no mistakes, that everything led me to the next thing I needed to find, and I wouldn't have been there without it. And I'm thankful for everything that has happened in my life, no matter if it seems ugly or bad, or, when you're sitting on a jail cell thinking, like, what the hell's going on here? That turned out to be one of the great impetuses that brought me to the next stage I needed to be at. I just had to listen.
Pay attention, absolutely. Focus in and pay attention. Yep. That's what the sound journeys do. They put you in the moment, in that space of receptiveness to your own intuition and the outer forces at the same time. Really align those.
I agree, and it's up to us to listen. So the energy and the information is put there, and it's up to us. That's the object of free will. Up to us whether we want to listen or not, and you eventually will. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end the night. This hour has flown by. Thank you so
an hour
much,
already.
Yeah,
it's been golden, Scott. Really golden. Great interview. Thank you.
Thank you for touching on so many pivotal spiritual concepts and creative aspects of life that I know the listeners and I enjoyed immensely. So hope you have a great evening, my friend. We should do this again sometime down the line, and I really appreciate you being on.
I look forward to it, Scott. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's listening. Peace.
All right, that was Michael Burke. You can find him at michaelmurphyburke.com. Really appreciate him being on and talking about all these awesome concepts tonight. And thank you for listening, my friends. We'll be back on Saturday. Cheers.